Stephen and crew, would you give your best Norm impression on what he would say about California's election?
Today, California voters emphatically made their voices heard in rejecting white supremacy by voting against this guy.
Perfect.
It would be a picture of Larry. We wanted to really do a tribute here to Norm Macdonald, and let me explain to you why. He's been one of the single biggest influences on me professionally on this show. I've talked about it at length. As a matter of fact, we'll show some clips of how many times I've talked about what my top two guests that I ever wanted to get were Norm Macdonald and Alice Cooper.
Yeah.
And so that's the real tragedy in all of this, is I'll never get to have them on the show.
It's true.
Truly. Yes.
There are other ways not to come on the show, Norm.
You know, that's the thing. You don't know who you hurt,
Cooper?
Norm. Yeah.
Well,
you better watch out, Alice.
He won't, because his publicist doesn't like me. So we're going to, and not only that, but I think a lot of people now jump on this bandwagon. Look, keep in mind that Norm Macdonald was reviled not very long ago by the Me Too people.
Yeah.
By the, I don't even know what hashtag we're talking about, but people now act as though they appreciated the brilliance that was Norm. People don't realize also what a devout man of faith that he was.
Yeah.
He tried to avoid politics, but it was pretty easy to pick up on where he lined up. So we're going to be talking about that today quite a bit, and I want to paint a more full picture of who the man was, and hopefully there's some people out there who maybe don't know about him too much, haven't appreciated him as much as you should, and really he should go along certainly with the greats. I would put him in funniest man that ever lived. I just want to show you, this must be from somewhere in the 90s, Norm Macdonald and Dennis Miller. This is a joke that may immediately get us banned from YouTube, which again proves my point. But here he is on Dennis Miller saying something you could never say today on air, even on HBO, talking about gay pride.
Have you ever done anything in your long and storied career that you consider specifically to be in bad taste as you look back on it? Maybe at the time you thought it was a good play, but you look back on it and you think that was in bad taste.
Well, sometimes, like in stand-up, I'll do jokes that are like one time I was doing this thing in San Francisco and they were all gay people in the audience, they told me. So I figured I'll do
San Francisco?
Yeah.
No.
So I figured I'd do stuff about gay people so that they could relate to it.
Yeah, it's warm up.
Right.
They love that.
And so I was talking about, because I went to this gay pride parade, and I saw in it there were these old men and old ladies like with these signs that said, "We are proud of our gay son," you know? And so I was saying, that's an odd thing to be proud of, you know, because it's not an achievement, you know? It's not like something you work all your life to be gay or anything like that. And I just wondered, I had a hard time believing that these 50, 60-year-old men are actually bragging, you know, at work, like they're, "Hey, Bill, you know, my kid, oh my God, we're proud of him, Johnny. He graduated from Harvard, you know, a first in his class, you know what I mean? Now he's articling over at a law firm, and, oh yeah, he loves cock." This kid. He can't get enough cock in his mouth, his ass, his kid's always cock. I got a picture of the boy here sucking another man's cock.
What's so amazing about him is everybody yesterday on Twitter was fighting as usual.
Right.
Just armchair, whatever. And then Norm died, and it just took over.
Yeah.
Right.
It was one of those things where even if people may have gone against him, whatever it was just nice to see a minute of unity.
The reason I don't like it is because in the old days they go, "Hey, that old man died." Now they go, "Hey, he lost his battle." That's no way to end your life, you know. What a loser that guy was. Last thing he did was lose. He was waging a brave battle, but at the end, I guess he got kind of cowardly was what happened. And then the bowel cancer, it got brave. You got to give it to the bowel cancer. You know, they were in a battle, and then what the And I'm pretty sure, I'm not a doctor, but I'm pretty sure if the cancer dies, I mean, if you die, the cancer also dies at exactly the same time. So that, to me, is not a loss, that's a draw. That's a, you know what I mean?
What's so great about that bit is it offended people, and he had the card to go, well, I have cancer, but he never
played it.
He just because he believed you could make fun of anything.
Exactly. You may know that he got kicked off of Weekend Update for making O.J. and Michael Jackson jokes. The reason that these jokes were the last straw is, yes, because the head of NBC at that time was friends.
Yes.
Right? Again, the elites with O.J., but also they were concerned about the fact that he was going after Michael Jackson so aggressively and O.J. and it being seen as potentially racist. So again, that's the context you need to understand back then that a lot of people now don't remember. Because now you're looking at it going, well, why would he get in trouble going O.J. and Michael? Like we all know. No. Back then, there was still a huge contingency of Americans who said going after them was a byproduct of white nationalism. So actually,
that was during the trial too. Not,
right.
Yeah, just that people when he was on Weekend Update making those jokes, and it's like, don't talk about OJ, he's my friend, and boy, did he lean into it until he lost his job. I love that.
And it was right after Rodney King.
Yep.
And it was a Mark Furman and Edward thing where they were trying to turn this all into a racial issue, and NBC wanted to avoid it. And so here, knowing that context, is a montage during this time of a racial powder cake. Seems like we've had those a lot. Norm Macdonald leaning into it.
And the Pope came out with a book this week, which contains a series of essays examining faith and morality in today's secular world and the changing role of the Catholic Church as it approaches the 21st century. The book is entitled, God Himself Told Me That O.J. is Guilty. In his book, O.J. Simpson says that he would have taken a bullet or stood in front of a train for Nicole. Man, I'm going to tell you, that is some bad luck when the one guy who would have died for you kills you. Judge Ito was interviewed this week by a local TV station in Los Angeles. Asked by the interviewer if it was appropriate for a supposedly impartial judge to be on TV with his case still pending, Ito said, maybe not, but how appropriate is it to kill your ex-wife?
He'd already been told, don't touch it. The racial thing and my
It was revealed today that O.J. Simpson told
Overtime.
police that Nicole Brown Simpson used to beat him up. He also claimed that she and Ron Goldman killed him. O.J. Simpson's lawyers have decided to skip hearings on DNA evidence and go right to trial. Asked why they did this, the lawyers replied, we want to get O.J. acquitted as speedily as possible so he can get back to doing what he does best, killing people.
You know it's coming and it's still funny.
Let's get to O.J. O.J. Simpson's lawyers say they don't want the families of Nicole Brown and Ronald Goldman in the courtroom during the trial. They're afraid the presence of the family members will just remind O.J. of how much more killing he still has to do.
What I love about Norm on Update was that he's not even doing that well with the audience. And at the time when I was young, I was laughing so hard I never noticed until I was a comic.
Yeah.
And the other joke I love that he did was he said, Lisa Marie Presley and Michael Jackson are getting a divorce. She wishes he was more of a homebody, and he wishes she was a 7-year-old boy.
Yeah.
I remember too. Gosh. I remember he said the closest thing he ever had to a perfect joke, and he used it twice. He used it with Christy Brinkley and Billy Joel.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But he said the most perfect version was Julia Roberts. Was she married to Lyle Lovett?
Lyle Lovett, yeah.
Yeah, and he said the most, probably the most perfect joke, is that I've been trying to search for. And he really was serious, trying to search for the perfect joke his whole life. He said, the closest I've come is where, the punchline was the same as the setup, where I said, Julia Roberts and Lyle Lovett have filed for divorce today, citing the reason that they realized she was Julia Roberts and he was Lyle Lovett. And that was what he said was probably the best joke he had ever written.
I just love the bravery, right? So his career was on the line. He's being told not to do these things. He'd probably be labeled a racist. Like you said, that was the trend that they were heading into. And he just came out and was just like, I'm absolutely going to double down.
Well, he was banned.
And it definitely hurt him because he didn't do as many movies as his other co-stars did from SNL. And it's a tragedy because I loved him as the lead in Dirty Work. He was great in that.
Dirty Work is underrated.
I love it.
I love Dirty Work. Dirty Work's original script, though, the R-rated version,
I
you
know.
can get online, is like the funniest thing I've ever read. So just imagine how funny the PG-13 is.
Yeah.
But Norm being able to do anything he wants. Like him in prison after they, rape him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Somebody's like, You should be ashamed. You know what hurts the most? It's the lack of respect. Well, actually, the anal sex hurt the most.
But right after that.
Second most. Second most. No, what's funny about this, too, is I'll tell you this scene. If you haven't seen Dirty, because we can't show it. We haven't seen Dirty Work. Yeah, he's sitting there. He's pulling up his pants. He's just been raped in prison. Yeah. That's what he says, hurts the most, is a lack of respect. Well, except for the other thing. That hurts the most. But what hurts the second the most is a lack of respect. He goes, you boys have a lot of growing up to do. I'll tell you that right now. Ridiculous.
Ridiculous.
This, I believe, happened. The claim is it was 1991 online. But I think he either retold it or they're wrong and it was 92 or 93 because I know I was there both of those years and watching from the crowd. And I remember hearing Norm Macdonald tell this joke. This is not political at all, but I remember as a kid, having really only been allowed to listen to Bill Cosby and like Jerry Seinfeld, not that much at this point. Keep in mind I was 5.
Yeah.
And my parents may not have been super familiar with Norm's stand-up because back then they knew him as the Weekend Update guy, but maybe didn't know a whole bunch about his stand-up. So I watched his set live. And he had a joke about a man killing his family because the devil told him to. And it was the first joke that I had heard with the structure that was totally different. And immediately he became one of, if not my favorite comedians. So I was watching this live, little Steven Crowder in 92 or 93. Norm Macdonald tell this joke, clip K.
Man, there's crazy guys everywhere. I was reading about this guy in the paper. Get this, folks. Guy I was reading about, he killed his whole family because the devil told him to. Can you believe that? What a dork, huh? That was the headline in the paper. It said, what a dork. But imagine that, you kill your whole family just because the devil tells you? Then afterwards you go back to the devil and go, yes, devil, I did as you instructed. I killed my family, slaughtered them as they lay sleeping, and then I chopped them up and put them in a duffel bag. Here they are in a duffel bag. I'll be burying them tonight at the shallow grave by the side of the railroad track, as you have commanded, O Lord host of the hoary netherworld. You know, and then the devil pulls off a mask. It's me, Bob! You go, oh, Bob! Yes, you got me, Bob, you got me. Is my face red or what here? Got my family in a duffel bag over here. Well, that's one for you there, Bobby. For you to miss again. You know, I'm trying not.
That reminds me of one of my favorites is when he's talking about shallow grave.
Yeah, serial killers.
Yeah, serial killers was like, you spend all this time stalking somebody, plotting their murder, eventually finding them, killing them, cutting them up. Then you get to the burial part and you're like, just throw some twigs and leaves.
Twigs and leaves. I forgot to roll clip J where he confused Larry King. And it's not that hard to confuse Larry King, let's be honest. But
he was friends with him, though. He was,
yeah.
Him and Larry King actually had a pretty funny dynamic.
But Larry King had zero sense of humor. That's why it was funny.
Yes.
Serious confusing Larry King about his sexual orientation.
Something people don't know about you.
I'm a deeply closeted gay guy. I'm not coming out, though.
Wait a minute. What are you revealing here today?
I'm not revealing anything. I'm saying I'm deeply closeted.
Well, that means you're gay.
Well, I wouldn't say that. Why would I say that? I'm deeply closeted.
That means you're very, very gay, but you don't want to come out. You're so closeted.
That I refuse to say I'm gay.
Right.
Exactly.
Doesn't that mean you're gay?
Hey, easy, buddy.
Easy, buddy. Hey.
Oh, he was the best with people who had no sense of humor. That's when he shines. So you were talking about how dangerous that was, the Weekend Update stuff. He was banned from The View. A lot of people know this. He was banned from The View, and I talked about this back in my Grand Rapids studio. These clips were not available for a very long time.
They were hard to find.
They were hard to find.
The first time we tried to pull these clips, they were gone.
So we'll show you, it'll sort of in ascending order, him kind of trolling The View a little bit.
Yeah.
Just, basically saying racially tinged things with Star Jones. To outright, basically, when people talk about this now, the Clinton body count.
Yeah.
Bringing the Clinton murder conspiracy to The View live on air. That's why he was banned. So it's a longer clip, but you need to see this progression. He was not allowed on The View for decades.
It was okay. What'd you think? Well, I tell you, I did love the pod race. That's the best
Star
part.
Wars.
There's this race in the middle of it. I'm a big Star Wars fan because
What about
Harrison
Billy
Ford-
D. Williams? I bet you like that.
I think you like that.
Yes, with my man Harrison Ford playing Han Solo. Now that was some Star
She's so
Wars.
offended.
So funny.
Now,
Look, he says it again.
I tell you, I confess it.
What about the Billy D.
You like
Williams?
George Bush, don't you?
I love George Bush, man. He's a good man, decent. You know, none of this. He's, he's not a liar, a crook, murderer, or anything like that. So it'd be good to get the. See, I think we should get the homicide out of the White House and get like a fresh start, because we don't want any more murderers.
I think we should just go on to the next question.
Who are the murderers?
Yeah.
Oh, Clinton, he murdered a guy.
Accusations without.
That's a little too far. Let's just go on to the next question.
Yeah.
This is not my week. What can I tell you?
Oh, it's not mine either, and I'm being very nice, okay? Be a good boy. Now, Norm.
Do you never hear that?
I don't want to get into this, and I don't want to hear it, and this is not the place to make those accusations, and you're supposed to be funny. Let's get on.
That was hilarious.
There you go.
This is a live show. Why?
Norm, but you have been properly chastised by Barbara, so I'm now going to ask the next
I
question.
thought it was a matter of record.
It just keeps going.
Not going to get him off.
Okay?
Well, they keep trying to overpower him, and they
Yeah.
can't. He's too
Back if
funny.
you don't shut up. All right, now. Let's talk football.
All right, manslaughter.
And by the way, the brilliance, here's the brilliance of that, the last line manslaughter, okay? There was no conspiracy or accusation of an accidental death.
No.
Right.
So in other words, when he says, all right, manslaughter, as though he's being conciliatory there.
Yeah.
No, he's drawing attention to the fact that this obviously could only have been premeditated murder. And this is back, George W. Bush had just won. So this would have been, 2000, maybe 2001.
Yeah, really early.
And
Oh, my gosh.
no one was talking about it. And I just remember watching it. I must have been homesick that day. I watched it live.
Oh,
And I remember going, at this point, there was no YouTube. I'm like, oh my God, where am I ever going to see this again?
Stephen and crew, would you give your best Norm impression on what he would say about California's election?
Today, California voters emphatically made their voices heard in rejecting white supremacy by voting against this guy.
Perfect.
It would be a picture of Larry.
that's exactly what I was.
Yep. Because, it would always have to be the perfect that's exactly it. There's no topping that.
All right. And this is where we get into the part of the portrait that the media will never paint. I would say the funniest man who's ever lived. Certainly, you could argue it.
I would agree.
And like I said, there's objectively funny. You could put at the top, people like the Richard Pryors, the Mount Rush. If you're having a Mount Rushmore, the George Carlins. And no one would argue with you if you were to say, I think Norm Macdonald should be up there. People may disagree, but they won't be like, oh, that's just so out of line.
Yeah.
It's true stand-up, though.
Right.
It's all comedy.
It's all comedy. But he personally was really pretty conservative, and later in life, a devout Christian, and his faith meant a lot to him. And this is someone who struggled. He struggled with, I think it's well-known, gambling. He struggled. He talked about struggling with issues, addiction issues. And I don't necessarily mean substance addiction issues.
One of my favorite things that he ever said about gambling was, it's a disease, but it's the only disease where you win money.
Although my buddy, I did want to say one thing about my buddy Richie, who has a disease. And, but it's an interesting disease he has. He has the disease of alcoholism. And he came to me, and he told me, and I like to look, I'm the kind of guy who likes to look at the bright side of things, So I told him, I said, Richie, it's true that you have a disease and everything, but I think you got the best one. It's the only disease where you get to drink booze all the time. I haven't looked at every medical journal, but I believe it's the only disease where you can constantly drink booze. As a matter of fact, that is the disease. And I don't think Richie would think if he'd had a disease. Like, I don't think Richie would go to my Uncle Bert, go, hey, I understand you got bowel cancer. Ah, man, I know how you feel. I gotta drink a lot of booze. Those diseases, they're tough, those diseases, huh, Uncle Bert? Hey, what's your symptoms, Uncle Bert? Well, my bowel, I got blood pouring out of it all the time. I got bowel blood pouring out, gushing out of my bowel, almost nonstop. And I got searing, clawing pains, ripping, tearing, mind-screeching bowel pains. And they're combined with aching, dull, soul-deadening bowel pain. Those are basically my symptoms. How about you? I get happy.
There you go. And
I love that bit just because he's speaking from a point of an addict.
Right.
And just saying how preposterous it kind of is, but at the same time, how, he feels serious about it.
Yeah.
And I love when he talks about going to AA, where he's like, he goes, you go into a church basement and you give everybody your name, which doesn't sound that anonymous. He's like, and you only give them the last letter because you don't want them to know who they're, and then it's just brilliant. I don't want to butcher it, but he's like, then you tell everybody, yeah, you blew a dog for a pint of gin. He's like, but he just goes, and who better to trust than a room full of drunks?
In a basement. And you know what's funny is you could this is what, when I've talked about this before, Norm is a litmus test because you could be an alcoholic or someone who's an alcoholism advocate and be offended by that.
I'm sure some are.
Yeah, there are plenty of people who have been. Or you could be like you and say, that's a brilliant way to turn it into take something painful and turn it into something funny. Norm really tried to push people's buttons. These weren't anti-jokes. People have sort of misrepresented that. They were jokes. They just happened to be jokes that pushed your buttons, sort of like an Alice Cooper, and that's why I think they're very similar. Alice Cooper learned how to push your buttons. And so did Dio. Dio back then talked about imagery, where he was like, how do you think that's satanic? How do you know what Satan looks like with that image? And how do you know that priest is the good guy? You're the one who's conferred this sort of this meaning to this imagery. And Norm Macdonald allowed people to copy-paste what they thought onto him, and so people would be offended or be brought tremendous joy by the exact same bit. Here he is, taking opportunities to express his faith, and it pissed a lot of people off, not to mention if you actually read his writings.
You get a lot of attention on Twitter sphere for being open about your religious views. What are they?
I'm a Christian. It's not stylish to say now.
No, are you devout?
Yeah.
You believe in the Lord?
Yes, I do.
You think you're going somewhere when it ends?
I don't believe it, but what people don't understand about faith is that you have to choose it. You know what I mean? They think that you believe it, but you have to choose it.
Why a bomber in Boston? Because if there is a God, he's omnipotent.
Yes.
If he's omnipotent, he could prevent it.
Yes.
Why didn't he prevent it?
I don't know, man, but you got to stop hanging out in that hot tub with Bill Maher all the time. It sounds like you got a God-shaped hole in your heart.
What the hell are you talking about?
And that just shows someone who doesn't know what he's talking about.
Let me state this emphatically. Norm Macdonald is the most important voice in all of comedy today. Period. Bar none. The reason that hashtag I'm with Norm, which is what I'm calling, is so important, he's not just a comedian. He's a veritable authoritarianism weather stick. He is a comedian with the single most stellar track record for using comedy to shine a light on the real taboos of our time. Because it's really easy to go up and make jokes about Christians in New York. It's really easy to go up and make middle Americans seem stupid. So because no one says what Norm says, it's shocking because all of a sudden being a Christian more right-wing is more taboo. We talked about that and what was edgy in comedy.
In 2018, they tried to cancel Norm. What was that for?
Comedians started calling for his scalp.
Yes.
Louis C.K. And Norm was one of the few people who stood up and defended him, and that's when people came after Norm.
Comedians have gone up against Louis.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was talking to some
comedians have said this guy should not be able to ever perform again. But it doesn't mean you can't forgive or it's impossible to forgive. I also don't feel anyone owes me an apology in public. I think personally that you owe an apology to anybody that you did ill to. You owe an apology to people that you're actions hurt in a financial way or an emotional way. But nobody owes me an apology, you know.
That used to be called, yeah, sure.
Yeah. When he talks about forgiveness, too, it's like it seems like that's a concept that we've forgotten in society.
He has been one of the biggest influences on this show, period. I used to tell people, when people used to say, and if you look at some of the jokes that we've written or that we've told on the show, you can clearly see the influence. David Letterman and John Stossel, that's how I used to describe it to people. I would say David Letterman meets kind of John Stossel. And then there's a little bit of early Howard Stern and the sense of humor. Norm Macdonald is always, you think he's the funniest person ever. The common thread that they all poked their finger in the chest of authority. From David Letterman daring NBC to fire him, or CBS to fire him, right? Showing up at the GE studios there with fruit baskets and them kicking him out of his own office. Norm Macdonald poking his finger in the chest of NBC. You can't tell Michael Jackson jokes. You can't tell OJ jokes. Well, I guess you should watch. And then he did it. John Stossel was reviled at ABC. John Stossel went against the grain and went from consumer reporting to reporting on government corruption. And whether you like what we do or not, look, YouTube and Google is the most powerful company that's ever existed. Number 2 through 5 would be Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Twitter, right? So that's the authority. You think that the media is fans of us? We have continued. So there's always been an influence for me. I've just always found it funny when someone, the jester, pokes fun at the king. Here's some quotes, though, too, from Norm, defending free speech and criticizing sort of the modern, like you're talking about modern comedians. He says, if you can tell me one funny, socially relevant joke, I'd give you $1 million. Comedians, when they get really good, and nowadays they don't even have to get good, reach a point where they feel they should be philosophers. I've heard it said even that the modern-day philosophers are comedians. I read modern-day philosophers. I'm sure they're insulted when they're compared to people who work in smoky nightclubs and hit on waitresses for a living. If you're watching a comedian on television, he's making a political point, I would say he's gotten too serious, which is ironic because he would do it, but he would do it through comedy.
Yes. Yeah.
In other words, you have to read through, he would do it in a way that was funny as opposed to someone like a Trevor Noah or a Stephen Colbert.
Well, he's saying just making the point.
Yeah, just
not
making the point.
The joke. Yeah.
Where they've decided that is their most important modus operandi.
That's why I never have a point.
The model used to be admit wrongdoing, show complete contrition, and then we can give you a second chance, talking about the two and the forgiveness. Now it's admit wrongdoing and you're finished. And so the only way to survive is to deny, and that's not healthy. It's not healthy because there's no forgiveness. And that ties up, I think, everything that makes Norm. Right there in that comment, what do you have? You have the point of view of someone who obviously thinks that comedy should be funny, and he thinks that, or at least he used it to poke fun at authority. And he thinks that he doesn't use the term cancel culture. He's more articulate in just saying cancel culture. Right? He's saying it's wrong to treat people this way. And the reason it's wrong is because we have a society where we're looking for scalps. There's no forgiveness. And where does that stem from? Where does all of that stem from? That stems from a worldview of Norm Macdonald that he has a job to do. And his job is not to go out and have a pity party over his cancer, which I think a lot of us would have liked to know how much time we had left with him. But this is how Norm lived his life. Whether you liked it or not, his job was to be a comedian. You only got to know what he wanted you to know about him. And he wanted you to know that he thought we were heading down the wrong path in the entertainment industry, in comedy, and a big reason because of that is because we've lost the forgiveness of someone, and an influence was very important in his life, of God. That's where that worldview comes from. Without God, the Lord-shaped hole in your heart, Larry King, there can be no forgiveness. I think I speak for all of us here when we say we miss you, and the world lost a good one.